Ted, what are you doing?
Trying to choose my familiar.
You know you really don't have to choose. You can actually have them all.
Really? I don't?
You don't. Let's talk D&D spells, getting the most from your fine familiar. Welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds. I'm Nerdarchy Steve, and as usual, hang out with this nerd.
Nerdarchy Ted.
Why don't you use that summon familiar of yours to hit that subscribe button?
And if you do, make sure you click that notification bell so we can deliver all of our Nerdarchy videos straight to you.
Hey Ted, familiars are great and all, but you know what would be better?
More choice?
More choices for your familiars, and we've got just the thing for you from RuneSmith, a Kickstarter that's going on right now.
That's Stibble's Codex of Companions. So this book is jam-packed, loaded with stuff. It's got over 70 stat blocks for low CR monsters that are going to be perfect for your Find Familiar spell or your Ranger's Animal Companion. You have got loads of things that are supposed to expand upon that. More beast-related spells, more feats, more options for you and your D&D players.
A whole new loyalty system. The more loyal your companion is to you, the more magic powers it'll grant you.
I think it's going to be more loyal you are to it.
I think you're right.
So you got to check this out. You know, our friends over at RuneSmith have got this put together. I am super excited. You know, this is going to be a perfect addition for my game that I run with my kids. My kids see this, they're going to be like, when are we getting it? When are we getting it? So go down to the description below, check it out, and add it to your game.
Yep, perfect for the pet collector player. There's also going to be minis as well. So when you're talking about familiars, you get a familiar by casting the Find Familiar spell or Flock of Familiars.
All right, I've got them pulled up right here. So first level spell, range area is 10 feet. It's instantaneous. Casting time is an hour. It's got verbal somatic material. It's conjuration, and the effect, it's summoning. You gain the service of familiar, a spirit that takes the animal form you choose. Bat, crab, frog, hawk, lizard, octopus, owl, poisonous snake, quipper, rat, raven, seahorse, spider, or weasel. Appearing in an unoccupied space within range, the statistics of the chosen form, though it is a celestial, fae, or fiend, your choice, instead of a beast. Your familiar acts independently of you, but it always obeys your commands. In combat, it rolls its own initiative and acts on its own turn. A familiar can't attack, but it can take other actions as normal. When the familiar drops to 0 hit points, it disappears, leaving behind no physical form. It reappears after you cast the spell again. While your familiar is within 100 feet of you, you can communicate with it telepathically. Additionally, as an action, you can see through your familiar's eyes and hear what it hears until the start of your next turn, gaining the benefits of any special senses that the familiar has. During this time, you are deaf and blind with regard to your own senses. As an action, you can temporarily dismiss your familiar. It disappears into a pocket dimension where it awaits your summons. Alternatively, you can dismiss it forever. As an action, while it is temporarily dismissed, you can cause it to reappear in an unoccupied space within 30 feet of you. You can't have more than one familiar at a time. If you cast a spell while you already have a familiar, you instead cause it to adopt a new form. Choosing one of the forms of the above list, your familiar transforms into the chosen creature. Finally, when you cast a spell with a range of touch, your familiar can deliver the spell as if it had cast the spell. Your familiar must be within 100 feet of you, and it must use its reaction to deliver the spell when you cast it. If the spell requires an attack roll, you use your attack modifier for the roll.
So you got a bunch of choices for familiars. You can do some things with it, like deliver a touch spell or see through its eyes or use its senses in general. All really cool. And the only spell list that you find the familiar on is the wizard.
But we also have Flock of Familiars. Second level spell. Again, it's touch. Duration is concentration up to an hour. Casting time of a minute. Verbal somatic, and its conjuration. You temporarily summon 3 familiars. Spirits that take animal forms of your choice. Each familiar uses the same rules and options for familiar conjured by the Find Familiar spell. All the familiars conjured by the spell must be the same type of creature, celestial, fae, or fiends, your choice. If you already have a familiar conjured by the Find Familiar spell or similar means, then 1 fewer familiars are conjured by this spell. Familiars summoned by this spell can telepathically communicate with you and share their visual or auditory senses while they are within 1 mile of you. When you cast the spell with a range of touch, one of the familiars conjured by the spell can deliver the spell as normal. However, you can cast a touch spell through only 1 familiar at a turn. At higher levels, when you cast a spell using a spell slot of 3rd or higher, you can conjure an additional familiar for each spell slot above 2nd.
So that's the only way to break the rule of only one familiar at a time. It's for duration. Now let's kind of talk about what can you actually do with the familiar. The spells kind of tell you a bit. So, essentially, you're going to use them as spies, messengers, assistants and helpers, companionship. I think they're great for role playing, basically, a non-game mechanic. And then we also mentioned you can deliver a spell through them.
All right, and it's a lot of fun with the rise of Pokemon and Naruto, Digimon and that kind of stuff. There are plenty of pet-based capture the creature shows, movies, what have you, that are out there. And as people come on the scene to play a game like this, they're like, well, why can't I do the same thing? So you could have a rule set. You could have, games where you are trying to power up your familiar. You are trying to see who has the best. So you could do a lot of fun things with it that are more in theme and like to those games, those shows that are out there.
Now, most familiars have, 1 to 3 hit points, so they're not going to be great combatants.
But, those shows get into, you've got to do a lot of training. You have to do things to improve your familiar. So if you want to play those kind of games, while there's nothing that's specifically in D&D, maybe Stibble's, codex will have some rules for making your familiars better, like they said, with that loyalty thing. Maybe that is a way to get access to that kind of stuff.
Now, like we said, generally they have 1 to 3 hit points, but they also generally only do a point of damage. So if you wanted to do the Pokemon thing and have familiar fights, maybe that's like the cockfighting of the fantasy world, is familiar squaring off, but they're really only good for 1 to 4 rounds of combat.
Well, and typically when you watch some of the stuff, I'm not a huge Pokemon fan, but my kids are all about it. And they love talking to me about it, but I've watched a little bit here. The combats don't go more than that. It's like a typical D&D round where, okay, by 3rd, 4th round, the combat's over and you move on.
Yeah, it's all scout because they all have, low hit points and low damage, so it kind of works out. So we mentioned that Find Familiar is only a wizard spell. Other people can technically get familiars. It's just it's easiest for the wizard.
All right, so right off the bat, the feats either Magic Initiate or Ritualist can give you access to the spell Find Familiar.
Now anybody can have a familiar.
Anybody can do it, but that's just using the feat and going down that road. But if we comb through the D&D books, there are plenty, well, maybe not plenty, but there are ones.
2. I think there's 2 other classes that can access the Find Familiar spell.
All right, why don't you go into that?
Okay, so as a Pack of Chains Warlock at 3rd level, you just automatically get Find Familiar, it goes in your book. You can even get better familiars. But also, Bard has magical secrets, so you could choose Find Familiar as one of your magical secrets. I don't think it's a great use of that ability, but if you really wanted to get a familiar that way, you could.
But there are other ways to get familiars as well. There are some of the creatures and some of the ones listed that the Warlock gets access to that say that if you come upon this creature, surely through role-playing aspects, that they can bond to you as a familiar. Now, they might not be able to follow all of the rules, because you can't change their form or summon them because you don't actually have that spell, but you could have it attach and get the other aspects of what a familiar can do.
So let's talk about those. First, we'll break down Pack of Chains Warlock. You have the choice of Imp, Pseudo-Dragon, Quasit, or Sprite. 3 of those are actually, like you mentioned, that you can now automatically just bond with them. The Pseudo-Dragon, Quasit, and Imp, not the Sprite, unless that's a typo or something, but it does not appear that they have the sidebar. So those 3 have a sidebar that says they can bond with you. And you essentially get all the benefits of having a familiar plus magic resistance, so it makes it even better. But like you said, you can't change their form and do things like that. But I believe the Imp can do that anyway. Quasit possibly as well. Pseudo-Dragon has their own thing that they can do. So all of that is pretty cool. But then there's also the Gazer, which a Gazer is a mini beholder, essentially, that gets a bunch of eye ray attacks. So that's kind of cool as well.
I love the Gazer. If I were to be, creating a character, I would be like, look, is there a way that I can get one of these things? Because they're cool. I think beholders, as they're very thematic of a D&D monster, so having a tiny one be your pet that floats around, I think it'd be pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, so right there, we're opening up fiends with the imp and the quasit, whether you want demon or devil. We're getting aberration with the gazer. A pseudo dragon, I believe, is still a dragon.
Yep.
Which is pretty cool. And Fae for Sprite if you happen to be a Pack of the Chains Warlock and you want that heart power that they get.
They know the emotions of the target.
They're like a Care Bear, but in Fae form.
Care Bear's there.
Well, no, they're not quite that cool. Back off a little bit. But yeah, so you went over the list of familiars when you talked about the spell. But you know what? When we look at them and kind of break them down, even from your basic beast animal familiars, not all familiars are created equal.
Sadly, it's true. So we're going to break down some of their aspects.
Okay. So actually, I'm just going to cheat. We don't do this too often, but we break out the notes, and it's going to be a little bit easier. So I'm just going to read through and basically what is the advantage of that particular familiar. You have the bat. They have blind sight, 60 foot, and can fly. There's a cat with keen smell. You've got crab. They're amphibious and blind sight out to 30 feet. The frog or the toad are amphibious. Hawk, keen sight plus fly. Lizard, they just climb. Octopus swim, water breathing, and they can hold their breath. So if they're not in water, they're going to eventually drown. But they can hold their breath for 30 minutes. Owl, dark vision, 120 feet, keen hearing and sight, flyby attack. You have poisonous snake, blind sight, 10 foot. They also have a poison. It's only a DC 10. It does 2d4 damage. You have a fish, swims 40 feet, water breathing, blood frenzy. Rat, you get keen smell. Raven gets mimicry and fly. Seahorse, swim and water breathing. Spider it also has a poison, but it's very weak, DC 9 and D4 damage or nothing on a save. And spider climb. Weasel has keen hearing and smell. So most of these you're going to choose for thematic reasons. Like literally, there's no reason not to take the owl. The owl is mechanically the owl is the most superior. Now there are some that do offer some other benefits. Like both the bat and the crab give you a decent blind sight, which can be really useful if something is going on and you can't see, your party can't see. Well, you can switch to your companion's senses and you would be able to see through them, which would be really cool.
That's all incredibly useful. We mentioned, off air that, you could summon the snake just to kind of milk it for its poison. And it's not huge, but it's free if you've got access to it.
It is an extra 2d4 damage, and you take half on a failed save. So some damage will be done. If you just want to have access to poison, you can. And the fact that we discussed, you can change the form of your familiar. And if you're going on an aquatic adventure, you would probably want to change and use one of those aquatic forms. Now we mentioned that being able to deliver touch spells through your familiar is quite awesome. Especially if you think about the cleric, if you want to heal one of your party members, that's a touch spell. Well, usually you have to go up into the fray in order to do that. Not if you send your owl that has flyby that just swoops in, touches your companion, heals them, or damages an enemy. But, if you're in a aquatic adventure, the Quipper has that blood frenzy ability. And so if anything doesn't have their full hit points, you now have an advantage to deliver that touch spell.
The creature is doing the action, but you're still using your modifiers for all of it. So you're going to get the best of both worlds. You're going to get the creature's sight or, actions ability with your modifier. So there's no reason why you shouldn't be exploring all of these extra options.
Yes, so choose your familiar carefully. So, also we were talking about before in one of the Critical Role episodes, they were an aquatic venture, and one of the things that Caleb did was transformed his familiar into an octopus and wore it like a helmet so that he could use its senses.
That is true. And in fact, I'm still behind the times, but I am slowly making my way back up to being on track. But in the most recent one that I watched, episode 84, they actually used Caleb's familiar because the NPC that they were going to talk to actually liked animals. So it's like, here's a nice cuddly kitty. And he's like, okay, be really friendly to this person. And, as soon as they brought up, hey, do you want to pet the cat? Personality completely flopped from just this, I am a super powerful wizard, to, oh my God, it's so cute and cuddly. So you can go outside of, the typical rule set if you are already aware that the NPC you're going to talk to is an animal person.
Yeah, you can use them for role playing, and there might be more uses for familiars depending on your dungeon master and how willing they are to say yes. So you can use them to do cool things. You can send your familiar off to get the keys to the jail that maybe you're locked in, different things like that, or send them for help. It could be a lot of fun. One of the tidbits that I did pull up, and I did think about when we were talking about the spell Find Familiar, is I was like, wait a minute, that's a conjuration spell. Conjurers are pretty good at conjuring things. So, a conjurer, when they summon something, it gets 30 temporary hit points. So that's a pretty beefy familiar.
Wow, that is pretty awesome.
And I also believe Circle the Shepherd Druid might have some things to add as well. So that'd be another area to check out. So you can definitely have some fun with your familiars and add some spice to your game. And, maybe you're playing a game where the Dungeon Master gives everyone a familiar just to start. Maybe you're playing with kids. I've seen role-playing games that are kind of built around that. So you could do more with it. You could make this a central part of your campaign, if that's the kind of game you and your friends want to play.
If you like this video and you want to see us talk more about animal companions, you can check out the Best Ranger Companion video right here.
If you want custom subclasses, 5e monsters, and more, consider supporting us on Patreon.
We create monthly content over there. We do monthly giveaways, weekly live chats, and so much more.
So until next time,
stay nerdy.